Hey everybody. So I decided a couple of days ago that I wanted to document my hysterectomy journey. Just not putting all my business out there, but just putting out information that I think could possibly help somebody else that may be going through something similar to like what I went through. So the first video is dedicated to the why. Like, how did you know you needed a hysterectomy, and the why. I'm trying to get my lighting good, y'all, because you know you can't do a whole lot. The first video is dedicated to the how and the why I had it done and how I knew I needed it done. So I've always had issues. And when I say issues, I just mean that I've always been at a high risk for like cancer and my, female body area. That's been forever. I've always been a high risk. My family is a high risk for cancer. And so, a while back, I started having issues with my monthly. And when I say I started having issues, one thing that I would have, it was a lot of cramping. And I would have hormone changes. And, I would not be the best person to deal with during that time of the month. And it would only last for about 4 days, but those would be the hardest, roughest 4 days, sometimes 5 days of my life. Between the cramping in the beginning, the heavy flow, I hate to say it, but it would be a lot of blood clots. Like, one of the major issues would be the blood clots. Because it just seems like you're losing so much blood. And then, towards the end, like around June and July, when it would be over, I was just so tired. And that's what kind of prompted me in July, late July, when I went to the doctor to tell them about some of the issues I was having. Because as long as I could have a monthly and I wasn't tired, like I can go through them 4 or 5 days, and when it was over, be like, oh God, glad that's over. And I could just jump right back into it. Whatever I was working on, whether it's shirts, masks, or just, everyday things at my job, I was fine. But when it got to the point to where I was worried at work, was it going to be a spot? Like if I got up from my desk to go to the bathroom, was I going to have a spot on my clothes because of all the heavy bleeding? When it got to the point to where my daughter and my BMF couldn't deal with me because, they couldn't deal with me because of my hormone, because you say something to me and it's like my attitude go to a 10 plus or a 12 plus because my hormones was just out of whack. And so like around July, when things started opening back up and I went to the doctor, that of course they always ask you those 40, 50 plus questions like, are you having any issues with your cycle? Do you have any heavy bleeding? Any pain during sex? Any painful periods? They ask you all those questions. And ladies, one thing that I want y'all to take away from this video is to just be honest. When you go to the doctor every year, you need to go to the doctor once a year. And if you're like me, which I was a high risk, I used to sometimes have to go to the doctor twice a year. So if you like me, you had to go twice a year. But when you go to the doctor for your annual checkup, for that now for your tackle box, your toolbox, your taco, your wop, whatever it is you want to call it, when those doctors are asking you those questions, you need to be honest with the doctor, with yourself. And if you're having any issues, you need to say, well, yeah, I'm having issues with my cycle, or I'm having issues, with a lot of cramping, or whatever the case may be. For me, I was having a lot of cramping. Like the cramping had got to where it was like a 12. My cycle was usually 4 days, had started expanding, and it was now more than 4 days, and I would have a lot of blood clots. And then after it was all over, I would just be so tired. Like I would just be tired. Like I'd be glad that it was over, but I would just be tired. I couldn't do anything. And so when I went to the doctor in July and I told my doctor in July what I was going through, she was like, well, she said, you know, a lot of African American women suffer from fibroids. And that was like the first or the second time I probably had heard the term fibroids, but I mean, I didn't think I had them. And so she was like, well, she said, it's a possibility, you know, it could be fibroid. She said, but what we're going to do is put you on the birth control. And maybe the birth control can help alleviate some of the issues that you're having. So, you know, with the birth control, the IUD she wanted to put me on, they tell you that your cycle has to be on. They tell you all of this stuff. So, on the day of the IUD, I called that the D-Day. Because that was, and D stand for damn, that was the damn day. But on that day, I went to the doctor because we had to schedule everything. It had to be approved by my insurance. So I went in for the IUD. And when I went in for the IUD, we had some issues. Like, my body was rejecting the IUD. And it was like the first time anybody in the room had ever seen that happen. Because my at the time, I was up under a nurse practitioner. And so she couldn't understand why my body kept rejecting. She's like, every time I try to insert it, it comes back out. It's like your body saying no. And so they had to go and get a doctor. So when they go and get the doctor, he come in and he's like, oh, well, she got a small cervix. So he's trying to do all this stuff to open up my cervix. And I'm like, is this what contractions feel like? Because I had never felt a contraction. So I don't know what contraction's supposed to feel like. But I was like, oh, hell no. Because I was up under that much pain, y'all. And mind you, I'm laying on the exam table or the exam bed, whatever you want to call it. And legs busted wide open. Because these people are trying to help me. And my body was like, no. Not going to do it. So, in the end, the doctor wound up having his assistant, having one of the other people in the room to go and get the ultrasound machine. And they went and got the ultrasound machine. And it's one of those that they insert into your vaginal cavity. So they inserted it in. And within minutes, the doctor found 4 fibroids. So he's like, to the nurse practitioner, and he's telling her that although the IUD was a good idea, it would not work for me because my fibroids were kind, they weren't huge, but they were kind of large in size. And so he was like, the only thing that could possibly help me was a hysterectomy. He was like, she's probably gonna have to have a hysterectomy. That's the only thing that's gonna help her issue, because actually it was a fibroid right inside the cervix. Like, once it come up the cervix cavity, like trying to make entry, evidently it was a fibroid right there blocking everything. So I don't know when they talk about fibroids and how they can be inside the cavity, whether it was pedunculated, meaning it's just inside the cavity or inside the walls or where it was. But I know that I had 4 of them from what the doctor was telling me. And the doctor basically was saying that the fibroids was there, and that the only thing they could possibly do at this point was just do the hysterectomy. So we started making a plan. And that plan also involved me coming back to see the ultrasound tech so that they could do another ultrasound to see where the fibroids were located and how big they were. And so when I came back in for that appointment, it kind of started another issue that I had, because I went in for them to do, for the tech to do her stuff before the surgery, because I had surgery on October the 6th. So October the 6th, which was last Tuesday, was the date that I had. So it hadn't even been a week. Was the date that I had my surgery on. So long story made short, the ultrasound tech go in to check and see where all the fibroids are located. And when she get done, because it's a wand that they moving around inside your vaginal cavity, I just felt like one of the fibroids must have got real irritated and aggravated and probably started acting like me. Because after that procedure, I bled for like 12 days. And I mean, you don't know what it's like until you have bled. And I'm sorry if this is graphic. This video is not intended for men. It is strictly intended for women. But I bled for like 12 days straight. 12 days. 12 days straight I had a cycle, and it wasn't until my surgery was on that Tuesday. It wasn't until like that Friday, that Thursday before my surgery, I went into the doctor office for my pre-op with the doctor office, and I think it was at that time that I stopped bleeding. And you know, by then my mind was made up, and I was like, you know what, Tanisha, you just got to push forward, because that didn't make any sense. But that was my reasoning for having the hysterectomy. You know, it was basically because I had a lot of issues in the past, and then the heavy bleeding, the painful cramps, the painful period. And one thing that I was in denial about was the pain during sex, because they ask you, you know, have you had pain during sex? And it's like, well, I like for it to be rough, but if I'm having sex, you know, I have to tell the person that I'm having sex with, you know, to lift up. But a friend of mine explained to me that it probably was the positioning and the weight of the person going into the factors, the issues that I was having, that all could have played a part into that. But in all honesty, you know, even for me, at one point, the sex had got painful where I didn't even want to have sex. So if I could get out of having sex, then I would get out of having sex, because I didn't want to have sex. So I had my hysterectomy done on October the 6th, and I'm now in the recovery phase. And you know, this is that long drawn out period where your body, you got to give your body time to do what your body need to do so that your body heal itself. And it can be boring. Like right now I'm bored, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna start documenting my journey. But I just want to encourage all of the ladies that do watch this video, you know, if you haven't had your annual done in a while, do not neglect your body and neglect yourself. Make a doctor's appointment, go to the doctor, and have your body, or have yourself, if you know what I mean, checked. Thank you, and I hope y'all enjoy it.